Hello, everyone. Welcome to Keeping the Beat, an engaging web series hosted live by TNMEA in partnership with the CMA Foundation. Tune in weeknights, Monday through Thursday at 7 p.m. Central Time to learn from and interact with music professionals from around the globe, representing every facet of the vast world of music. Today is Thursday, May 14th, 2020. My name is André Dowell, and I am the Chief of Artist Engagement for the Sphinx organization. I am so excited to have this conversation tonight with Dworkin, founder of the Sphinx organization and professor of arts leadership and entrepreneurship at the University of Michigan. Of course, my alma mater, Go Blue. Though I should say I am also from a small but mighty town called Trenton, Tennessee. Tonight, we will be talking about diversity, entrepreneurship, and innovation. We encourage you to interact by replying to this live video stream with your questions and comments, which we will respond to throughout the hour or next 45 minutes. Just one disclaimer, while this is being streamed live, it will remain on the Keeping the Beat Facebook page for future reference. So as such, your comments will also remain a part of the archive. So please, I ask you to join me, and I want to welcome Aaron Dworkin to start the conversation. Aaron, welcome to Keeping the Beat.
Andre, it's great to be able to be here with you.
Awesome. It's so great having you. First of all, how are you doing?
Doing great. It's really interesting, at times like this, that question has taken on a whole new meaning. So, no longer people are like, oh, I'm good, I'm great, I'm fine. Like, well, how are we doing? But what I would say, my big overarching reply is always that I'm actually just deeply appreciative. There are so many people who are going through profound medical and health challenges and or profound financial challenges because of their work situation. And at least, knocking on wood, thankfully so far, I haven't had to deal directly with a health challenge, and my work, I've been able to, while significantly affected and transformed, I've been able to continue with my work. So my primary response to kind of how's it going is I'm feeling appreciative.
Yeah, no, that's a very great word, and something some of us can't use the same terminology, but some of us can, and the times right now are very challenging for some. And I'm glad to have this conversation in terms of how we can move forward in today's economy and environment. And I want to first talk about just the words of our conversation. And so the first word that I want to talk about is just diversity. And I had the fortunate opportunity to learn about the Sphinx organization at I would say a young age. My freshman year in college back in 19.
We're all young, Andre. We're all young.
We're all young. But I want to talk about the word diversity. And I'll say that that the Webster dictionary defines diversity as the condition of having or being composed of different elements, or the inclusion of different types of people. Now, when you started the Sphinx organization, we were kind of filling a void of diversity in classical music and talking about inclusion of different types of people. So, and fast forwarding to today, 22, 23 years later, I'm wondering if the word diversity means something different to you now in today's environment than it did 20 years ago when people weren't really talking about diversity, but now diversity is taking on a whole new meaning, and conversations are being had every day amongst several different organizations.
Well, it's interesting because to me, diversity means the same thing, but the way people talk about it, you're completely right, has profoundly changed. And in large part in the arts field, people really weren't talking about it when Sphinx was founded over 20 years ago. One of the things that really sticks with me actually are the words of Chimamanda Adichie, great Nigerian author. And she talks about the danger of a single story. And she says, the danger of a single story is not that it is untrue, but that it is incomplete. And the stories that we weave in the arts are incomplete. They were incomplete 2 decades ago, and unfortunately, they are still incomplete. And so while we have dictionary definitions for diversity, and Sphinx as an organization has definitions for, kind of its mission, ultimately, I think we have to step back and say, this incredible medium that we have of the arts, this ability to tell stories, are the stories that we are telling incomplete or not? And if so, what can we do, especially during times like this, where there are stories of those who are impacted by the pandemic, whether it be in New Orleans, whether it be in Tennessee, whether it be in Detroit, or New York, obviously one of the biggest national epicenters. Are we telling the stories of those that don't get on the big, news channels? Are we telling the stories of the frontline healthcare workers? And are we utilizing this ability that we have through composition, through music, through all of the arts, to be able to kind of share these experiences that some of us are going through with others? And I would just add that I think that one of the reasons why this is so important, and not just diversity, isn't that nice? And, it's a progressive idea and we should all feel good about it. At a time when our country should be more unified than ever against a singular common enemy of this disease, right? We are instead, kind of rife with disagreement and with misunderstanding and all of these different things. The arts are what create those bridges, because I don't think for a lot of the people who might disagree, who might be in an area where the pandemic really hasn't hit and they're like, why should we be shut down? And we've got to be like locked in our houses. Meanwhile, other people who are in the front lines are like, oh my gosh, we need to be shut down more. And those two opposing viewpoints look at each other and go, we're different. We don't understand each other. Are we even part of the same country, the same sense of who we are as a nation? And the arts can help bridge that to say, here's how we understand each other. Here's why we may feel differently, but we still have a shared humanity. And that power of the arts relies on diversity. So if we don't have it within our field, we're unable to serve that role to our broader society.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about, you talk about diversity and the role of the arts, right? So when we think about the arts in today's environment, and when we talk about diversity, I want to talk about it on a larger scale in terms of our ability to reach different audiences, for example. This show even allows us to reach different audiences that we may not have had the opportunity to reach. Because we're being creative and thinking of all these opportunities to create these different platforms. And so what would you say in terms of the arts, right? The arts being able to reach a more diverse community, what type of impact will it have when things get, I don't want to say things get back to normal, because I don't personally think that there will be the same type of normal. But when things get back to kind of the status quo of being out in the world and doing everything on a global basis, what role does diversity right now? What can we be doing in terms of diversifying our audience base, our reach, things of that nature? What would you say to that?
Oh, well, for sure that we should. And I think the nature of the pandemic just, like it's doing with many things, shines a magnifying glass and saying, here's why this diversity in the arts is so important as it relates to the pandemic. But separate from that, and I completely agree, we will not be back to normal. There will be a new normal for sure, even post-vaccine. some of the things we've experienced now because of this pandemic will simply never change, and they will continue on. And most profoundly, of course, the loss that so many people have experienced, that will obviously stay with them and will define their futures. But in terms of this role and importance of diversity, especially within classical music, we need to look and say, are there mechanisms so that we can reach, not just in terms of diversity, cultural, differences, more audiences of color, but also younger audiences. Classical music is this, is this extraordinary medium through which to speak and to share experiences. And to be able to convey that to younger audiences who may think, oh, classical music, I don't want to be, involved in that. I'm not really into classical music, even though they don't realize they are. Classical music is in their games. It's in all those video games that they're playing, right? It's in, cartoons growing up. Right. Classical music surrounds us. It's the idea for some of classical music that makes them a little hesitant. And so the more that we can show how our art form, its performers, its staffers reflect the communities that we want to reach, both in cultural background as well as age, the better equipped we will be able to be to engage those audiences.
Yeah. No, thank you. That's amazing. I totally agree in terms of engaging also. I want to quote Julie from Union City, Tennessee, who's just chimed in and says that she agrees with you. COVID is a common enemy, but an opportunity not just for our country to bond together, but our world. It's a tremendous opportunity to be a little bit more tolerant society as a species. And she loves the term shared humanity and hope for Americans to come together. But if the world doesn't learn to support diversity, it's an even bigger missed opportunity. I know your life work has been with diversity, and you're now I should say, but you're the professor of arts leadership and entrepreneurship at the University of Michigan. I want to shift the conversation a little bit to talk about entrepreneurship, and there are several different definitions. I would love to know your definition. When I think of entrepreneurship, I think of someone who sees a specific need and takes on the ideas and also the financial risk to launch that idea to fill that need. And when we talk about the Sphinx organization, I know that how the Sphinx organization started, and you were really inspired by having a lesson one day and pulling some music off of a shelf and wondering, Black composers in classical music, I should delve into that a little bit more. And what does it look like? So when we talk about entrepreneurship, you saw a need to diversify classical music. You took on the risk to start the Sphinx organization to fill that need. I'm wondering right now, as we relate to COVID-19 and today's environment, how do we encourage people? There's clearly a need right now for classical music, and live performances have been minimized, canceled, postponed. How do we tackle entrepreneurship as it relates to classical music and reaching today's environment?
Yeah, so well, one of the things that I would just to kind of clarify or share from my perspective about entrepreneurship, because I think it's so important. I often refer to it as the ability to create a sustainable enterprise around one's art making. And the reason why that's so important is that, especially in the arts, we're creative types. We got ideas. We wake up with ideas. We fall asleep with ideas. We've got ideas. But an idea without any sustainability is just a dream. And it doesn't actually impact anyone or do anything to change, evolve, or further the world or communities, or for that matter, the person who had the idea. And so the skill sets that one can bring to bear so that you can build a sustainable enterprise around that idea is critical. So in the case of Sphinx, right, this idea of, having those experiences, as you said, of looking around myself and saying, there's very few people of color in this field that I am a violinist in. There should be more diversity. That's an idea. But pretty much it's a useless idea. I can have it, I can sit around and talk about it with people, but if it didn't actually change the opportunities or access for young people of color, if it didn't change the visibility and awareness of the talent that existed, if it didn't impact the financial resources and bridges towards professional careers of musicians of color, then all it is just talk, and anyone, can have that. So it's that ability to build the idea into a sustainable enterprise. Now, this can kind of manifest itself in different ways. So sometimes it can be an organization and it can be a mission, like, transforming lives through the power of diversity in the arts. It could be some other type of organizational mission, certainly beyond a singular person. But in the arts, that entrepreneurship could also be around one's individualized art making as a spoken word artist, as a cellist, as a dancer, as any musician. There may be some way I want to speak to people that I feel I can be on stage or just around other people and somehow impact them with my art making. So that's great. But now the question is, how can I build a sustainable enterprise around that so that I can spend my life doing that? And for too many years, all of our, institutions of excellence in the arts were focused on developing the craft. Unfortunately, that's not enough. Yes, you absolutely have to have that. It makes no sense to build a sustainable enterprise around no craft at all and no excellence to underlie it. But once we've built, and as we continue to, because that process should never stop, of building our craft, how do we build a sustainable enterprise around it? And that's critical. And that's, of course, one of the things we're trying to do at Michigan. And that my hope is to try to be able to really inspire many people in our field to do, which is to understand how critically important those skill sets are.
No, yeah, I mean, what you're saying is so important and relevant right now. I want to, in terms of entrepreneurship, I mean, right now, there are people that would argue that everyone is an entrepreneur. And right now, there are several different ideas that people have that they want to put into place. And in terms of entrepreneurship, how does one move from and having an idea to actually being an entrepreneur? Because I feel like you can have an idea, but it doesn't make you an entrepreneur, right? But how does one move from, especially right now, a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people have a little bit more time on their hands to take on these tasks or these ideas that they come up with right now. So how does one move from an idea to being an entrepreneur?
Yeah. Well, so it's interesting. I actually dedicate a significant amount of my teaching to what I refer to as the mindset of an entrepreneur. So one of the very first things I would say, the vast majority of people I encounter, while they may have ideas, they simply do not act on that idea in any way, shape, or form. So first off, right off the bat, my question is always, oh, great. And they're like, well, I want to be an entrepreneur. I have this idea. I was like, well, what have you done about that idea? Let's forget about whether it's right or wrong or good or bad, or it was successful or not. I'm just curious initially, did you do anything about it? Because if you didn't, then we just have to get to action to begin with. Are you actually serious? Do you want to do something about this idea? Then we can begin to talk about those. Now, of course, we could spend hours and a whole semester on this whole process. But what I would say to kind of condense many things into some basic things is from the initial idea, you really have to then vet that idea, right? You have to say, is this an idea that I can build to some level of sustainability? One of the biggest things I talk about there is welcoming criticism, being able to reach out, engage with people, engage with opinions that you value, but listen to them, incorporate them. I could say with a surety, I have never had an idea that I then brought to fruition, that whatever I brought to fruition was the same as the original idea, Sphinx included. And that's because I listened to people. I realized I certainly did not know everything the best way to do it, the right way to do it. So I needed information. So certainly idea vetting is a key thing. Also the infrastructure that you're building around yourself. And by that, I mean the people, the technology. You should obviously surround yourself with people who know more than you do in those areas. You have an idea and it's going to require some type of marketing. If you're not a marketing expert, you need to bring someone into your fold who knows more than you do about marketing. If if you've got something and there's financial components and you're not a financial whiz, you need to bring someone who knows more, et cetera, right? So you need to surround yourself with that as well as the technology so that you can actually, again, bring the idea to forth. So those are, again, just a couple of things. So many people I see don't even get to kind of questioning, vetting the idea, then building the infrastructure around it. And then obviously bringing it. I definitely do not think you should let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? So in other words, you need to put something out there. Tech firms like to call it MVP, minimum, viable product. We don't necessarily use the same terminology in the arts, but what you want to do is come forward with something, right? This show was an idea. But if someone just sat there and said, it would be so great if we could talk about these ideas and have people ask questions and further knowledge and inspiration and motivation around these topics in our field, yeah, that would be nice. No. How then to vet it? What does that mean? How are we going to bring it? What technology we're going to bring to bear? What production expertise do we need? Do we need resources? In which case, do we have resource expertise that can be brought to bear? Do we have phenomenal hosts like André Dowell who can come on to the show, right? So in other words, right? So the point is, how are you bringing people that actually make an idea happen? And as you, of course, know, as it relates to Sphinx, right? The idea, that's like the small part at the beginning, right? It's all of the day-to-day work of an extraordinary group of people utilizing an infrastructure that actually enables change to happen in our field.
Aaron, I mean, I love everything that you're saying right now. I want to go back to something that you said and something, quote unquote, I think I'm going to say this exactly how you say it. You said, about being right or wrong, successful or not, in terms of being innovative. And so I know because I know you, I know that there have been a lot of entrepreneurial events that you have, or tasks or projects that you have done that have failed. And I use that word because a lot of people are actually very afraid of the word fail. They are afraid to fail. And I want to take just a moment to talk about, especially right now, the fear that people have. And I want to quote, it looks like Victor Sawyer. He says, he loves your philosophy. Thank you. How do you get over the fear of following an idea during a crisis like this?
Yeah, well, and thank you, Victor, for tuning in and for sharing your thoughts. So a couple of things. One, you're absolutely right. I have failed more times than you could possibly imagine in any host of ways, and including failures. Not only the 7 projects that I tried to start before Sphinx, that failure as in they did not become ongoing sustainable enterprises, but yet without which I never would have been able to start Sphinx, right? So so they are failures in that they were unable to become ongoing concerns. but they were critical to my own evolution and the evolution, I think, of our field. In the same way that's not all of the things that Sphinx does are able to be ongoing, sustainable. They could be termed as failures, but they help Sphinx's evolution and they help the evolution of the field. So a few things about that. One, I love the quote that courage is not the absence of fear, but action taken in the face of fear. And so it is absolutely not that I don't have fear of failure or fear of these things, but it's that you choose how are you going to act, understanding and knowing those fears that you have. And actually for me, I wish it was kind of courage or bravery, but I think it's not. It's actually a greater fear. I have a greater fear of falling asleep at night going, I wish I would have. I wonder what would have been. I have a greater fear of that than going to sleep at night, as I have often going, well, that didn't quite work out. I have just a much greater fear of living a life of kind of, you know, shoulda, coulda, woulda. I have, it's deeply unsettling to me to live like that. And so it's in some ways the lesser of fears. So I think there's that. And I think it's important to understand that you can use failure to move forward. In your failures, you learn, and you learn how to do things better. If someone was starting an internet show, right, they might do it at first and they might not understand about lighting or about sound. And as they go through it, they're going to learn and say, or technology glitches and all of a sudden things cut out, right? Or those types of things. So they'll learn, oh, maybe I could set up lights not behind me, but in front of me, or I could, you know, think I should have a hardwired connection instead of Wi-Fi with 10 people gaming, you know, in my house, or, you know, right? So you begin to learn, and by failing, we do things. And that's why I always encourage students, better, I'd so far rather you actually go out and do something and have failed than to sit back and go, well, I would have, but. You know, the world is just not built on that. Organizations aren't built on that. And the evolution of the arts are not built on that. They're built on experimentation, innovation, and a whole lot of failure.
Experimentation, innovation, and a whole lot of failure. I think that's so important because, as I said before, a lot of people are afraid of failing. And if they try an idea and they fail, a lot of people cannot recover from that. And so I think that what you're saying is so important in terms of how to move things forward and your ideas forward. And you talk about innovation. You know, we define, which is another subject line in our conversation. We talk about innovation, you know, a new method or an idea or a product, not to be confused with invention of something. But innovation is a new method of something that has kind of been invented already. So we talk about one of the examples I really like to use, you know, Dropbox, for example. Dropbox was started because a student from MIT, I don't know if he was a student or maybe a teacher, but someone from MIT one too many times left their thumb drive at home. And so they wanted to come up with a new way of being able to reach their technology. Or we talk about Under Armour, who was founded really because someone had to change their shirt multiple times because they were sweating too much. But these are, this is an innovation in its truest form. So I would like to talk about, you know, and the subject line is to be defined, but, you know, blank was, when we talk about the arts, blank was created because live performances and art were canceled or postponed. Blank was created because artists are now at home and their work has been reduced or they are out of work completely. Blank has been created because when we think about innovation and think about our current environment, COVID-19, blank has been created because. Can you kind of fill in the blanks and talk about what that means to you?
Oh, well, I mean, there's so many examples. Well, this show, right? Has
Yes.
been created because of this environment that has happened. So this show wasn't able to exist. So what I'm thinking about is once there's a vaccine and things kind of go back to the new normal, so to speak, where will this show be? I think there are so many opportunities for this show to then take on a new meaning, a new evolution. So something will exist in our field, serve, bring value that otherwise didn't, but wouldn't have existed if not for this extraordinary challenge that we're all facing, right? And I think that's one of the things actually I was going to mention earlier when you were talking about failure and success. A lot of people are like, I want to be successful. And I always like, what does that mean? It means so many different things to different people. But Albert Einstein said, strive not to be of success, but to be of value. And so I think if you are able to develop things, to be innovative, to bring about something that is of value. So right now, all of these things are happening. Most people are stuck at home. So there are things related to doing things virtually that are bringing value. Virtual galas, virtual performances, orchestras, shows, right? All of these things are happening in this way. All of a sudden, I see advertising that you would never have even heard of, but touchless, right? Everything is touchless now. Touchless pizza delivery, touchless this, touchless that, which seems so much against human connection, but it's bringing value, right? So people are innovating. And what will happen after the pandemic is that there will be people who will still prefer touchless. You know what? I actually like this whole, I don't have to touch people and I don't have to give cash and back and forth and all of those types of things. I kind of like this, and some of those things will stay. So for me, the idea of innovation is not about in any way, how am I successful? How can I be lauded? All these things. Am I able to bring something of value to a community, to my field, to my discipline, to my art form? And through that value, all the other things, will come. And so as you think about, as you were saying, through this, pandemic, X is going to appear. I think whether it's this show, whether it's a host of all of the things that we see that arts organizations are doing virtually. Interestingly, I'll share one of the things that I think is going to change. We already see this. Certain corporations have already announced it, at least through 2021 and or even beyond. Some are saying we'll do it permanently, but is the work remotely. Right. So meanwhile, something that Sphinx, as you very well much know, has been doing for more than a decade, and you see all the value that it brought to productivity, effectiveness, efficiency. But in our world, there was general still resistance. Even for the past decade, there was an idea of you're really not working if you're not in the office. That has vanished, right? Because now everyone has worked out of the office and they realize, oh, you actually are working. And most of the studies have actually shown people are working more. And because now all of a sudden there's no commute time and all the other things that, of course, very well from Sphinx. So what I think is that because of this pandemic, working remotely and the things that are associated with remote work are going to remain. It won't matter, we'll have a vaccine, all of that, but the way in which we work has permanently transformed in the arts and in the broader society.
Absolutely. I mean, the way we work right now is just so different on so many different levels, whether you're a professor, whether you're a freelance artist who has experienced a lot of jobs and opportunities fall and has affected your bank account. Like, these are real things that people are experiencing. And when we talk about entrepreneurship and innovation, I personally see right now a prime opportunity for people to be innovative, to be entrepreneurial, and to start something new, and to see, what is it right now that I can be doing that will be sustainable now. And then there's a question of what will be sustainable in the future. What will, and no one knows this, but what will the new normal look like? Because it will look different. no matter where you are on the side of the equation in terms of working or not working, audiences or no audiences, the reality is that the future looks different for everyone. And so that's so important. And what you say is something of finding something of value. I hear that, and I hear finding meaning and something that is important to you as an individual, finding that meaning and putting that into action. And so I think that's so important right now, and keeping in mind that failure is a good thing. It's a part of the equation.
Yeah.
And so I want to, we unfortunately, we only have a few minutes left. I see you're about to comment. I'm gonna let you comment, and then we'll get into some questions that are coming in from my viewership.
Awesome, great. So I was just going to comment on the meaning thing, because I think this is important, which is that first and foremost, absolutely, we have to do what brings us meaning in life. Unfortunately, too many people actually don't identify that. So I think you absolutely need to find that. In addition to that, I do think that it's critically important that not only does whatever it is you're working on have meaning to you, if it's going to be sustainable, if you're, kind of not, if you don't have a magical trust fund or something like that, you need to keep a roof over your head, then it needs to be sustainable. And that means you have to be bringing some type of value to something, someone, some community, some organization. For example, when it's starting out, and obviously diversity, right, like literally in my DNA and my blood, obviously had all kinds of meaning for me. But if that impact of diversity was not bringing value to the field of the arts, to classical music specifically, then there would be no Sphinx organization, no matter how much meaning it had to me. I couldn't personally fund it. I couldn't personally, be all of the 100+ partnerships, of presenters and orchestras and all of these people and organizations and institutions that you're working with on a constant basis. But the reason why they're working with you is not because it's actually of meaning to you or to me. They're doing that, they're partnering, they're lending their resources, they're engaging because it's bringing some type of value to them and what they do in the field. So this aspect of seeing how what fills you with meaning can bring value to others is actually a critical component.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. Aaron, thank you for expanding on that. And because we only have a few minutes left, and I could sit here and talk about this all day, all night. But we have a few minutes left. I want to wrap some of the questions together, and then we can kind of address them. So one of the questions comes from Chelsea Jones, and she wants to know, how did you build the Sphinx organization to be sustainable? That's question number one, talking about sustainability. Question number two is from Drew Davidson, who loves the Sphinx organization. I know Drew. He wants to know if we can talk about, what bold steps we would take to see people, organizations, and institutions take to make sure that all of our young people, specifically those that have traditionally been left out, are fully welcomed into the art space. So that's the second question. And then the third question, just because we're running out of time, I want to wrap them together, comes from Julie. And she is really the person who's keeping TNMEA going. Our program, our Keeping the Beats for TNMA program feels very entrepreneurial, but it is certainly not sustainable after COVID-19 ends unless someone takes over. But it's been temporarily doable and hopefully helpful to others. She has totally unpaid team working many hours who are faithful to the project because they trust in the vision. As she is the department chair of the university, is definitely a misconception, which I'm sure you can understand from some, that that her and other administrators have more time on their hands. It's the opposite, and she's sure that the case with many other professors as well. So that feels good to us all, and giving us arts-based mission to some important to note the opinion. So many are doing this now. But she didn't really have a question, but wanted to state those specific facts. So we're talking about sustainability of the Sphinx organization. We're talking about bold steps. And then we're talking about leaders of institutions starting programs now that may or may not be successful following COVID-19.
Right. So a whole lot wrapped up in there. Why don't I do this? Why don't I start with trying to address Chelsea's question about sustainability, and then if you can kind of help me a little, I could try and tackle Drew's, and then we can go from there. So Chelsea, first of all, thank you for your question and for tuning in. So in terms of sustainability for Sphinx, so of course it could spend several hours talking about a lot of those things that got built along the way. So I'll try and, again, condense a lot into just very little. Definitely critically important, the team of people. Critically important. So there was a small group of people working for next to nothing, for sure initially, and I myself, of course, not working for anything initially, who were dedicated to the mission. And it's the people who are involved, and then ultimately the people both who are, if you will, the core staff team, but then also faculty and artists and the participants, everyone combined. Those people are what make Sphinx sustainable. They are the essence of what it is. And so the people you surround yourself with, key to sustainability. The other thing that I would say, and people like to, kind of talk about it in these very generalized ways, but we have to, which is funding. It is critically important. Now, you need a solid idea. You need something that's bringing value, right? All those things we talked about. However, without funding, you can't do anything with it, right? You can have the best idea on the planet. If you don't have the funding and the resources, you cannot do it, right? And here's the really tough part of that. The flip side, if you have kind of a mediocre idea, but you have all the funding in the world for it, you're going to be sustainable. That's just the way the world works. It's unpleasant, but it is the truth. And so, of course, I think you need to bring the best idea and you need to be bringing that value, but you cannot minimize that you must get that support. And the vast majority of your time early on, taking an idea and making it sustainable will be focused on the resource development piece, which oftentimes, right, we want to be like, I want to be all about the arts part. I want to be, what are we doing with rep? And I want to be working with the artists and all of that. But if you actually have your ultimate goal in mind, then you are probably going to be focused on the resource development, because that is what the sustainability requires. So that's kind of the sustainability piece. And thank you again, Chelsea. For Drew and Andre, could you kind of maybe just kind of recouch the essence of his question?
Yeah, he wanted to know really about bold steps that we can see people, that we would like to see people in organizations, institutions take to make sure that the young people, specifically those who are traditionally left out, are fully welcomed into the art space.
Yeah. So again, thank you, Drew. And I love also your question and framing it as in bold steps, because a lot of times we do need that. And I actually want to just comment on that, because all too often in academia and in the arts overall, we say, well, we need to kind of take incremental steps, so on and so forth, to do things. The last 2 months shows that we can bring about a whole lot of change, not incrementally, right? We could show that everyone can begin working remotely immediately. So all of the institutions, with all of their wisdom, for who 2 decades said, we really can't work remotely, it's not effective, it's not efficient, we can't do it. For academia, we can't teach remotely, it's not possible. we've been doing it for the last couple of months, and charging students the same tuition. So clearly we think there's a similar value, it's so, and I've been doing it, and I can absolutely say, is it the same? Absolutely not. Would I prefer to be in obviously the same room and engaging with students on that level? Of course. But does it mean I can't do it, right? So in other words, oftentimes it takes great adversity for us to be bold. So to go to your question, I would say that if you can act in bold ways without the adversity forcing it, then oftentimes you can do extraordinary things. And so to be frank, I would say it's the courage to do them and to listen to the feedback of sometimes people saying, well, we need to be incremental, we need to do this. Hear it so that you can avoid as many pitfalls as possible, but then be bold. Make that decision. Say, you know what, I'm going to try. I've heard feedback. I think I'm avoiding as many pitfalls as possible, but this is so important. It can't wait. It can't be done incrementally. This is something that needs to be done now.
Absolutely, Aaron. Absolutely. And it's 8:46. And I want to ask two more questions just to go over time.
Sure.
One of the questions is, with my work with the Sphinx organization, I have the opportunity to work with several different artists and presenters and orchestras. And one of the things that I've experienced a lot of, and musicians are experiencing right now, are lost gigs, lost income, etc. And there are a lot of musicians and artists, I should say artists, and really a lot of people who are concerned right now about, online content and offering online content for free. And what does that look like when things get back to, we're able to play in live venues, and right now we're offering content for free instead of being paid for your art form. And I wonder right now, how does one approach being developing a sustainable model that is both sustainable now, but once things are back to live performances, how does one build their portfolio now to make sure that they are successful once we get back to live performances, and how do they develop their audience base? What steps, what should they be doing? Are they their own marketing person? Are they their own manager? Everything. What should one be doing right now?
So this is a great question. And unfortunately, all too many artists, not just musicians, visual artists, right? No exhibitions, all kinds of stuff, no gallery openings, etc. So it's dance, obvious theater, right? It's the same thing across the board. So this is a very, very significant issue. So a few things. One, the pandemic will evolve, and we will at some point have a vaccine or some type of similar treatment that will enable some level of return to live performances. So there will be live performances. But there is this kind of changed sense that people have. And so what I would encourage people to do is to say, how am I going to build a sustainable enterprise around my art making related to this? So yes, a lot of people have had to put content up online for free. The reason is because if you were to charge, say, put up a firewall of $10 or something like that, you might not get anyone. So my response to that is, why is no one willing to pay for your art at this point in time? I think it's way too easy to put it on the platform and say, well, it's because I'm online. I have way too many online subscriptions that cost me $10 a month to say that everything online is for free, right? Now, basically, the way you can be online for free and offer an extraordinary value is to be able to buffer it with advertising, right? Which means you have enough eyeballs on what it is that you're doing that advertisers find value, right? So I would look at, and some artists, the nature of their artistry will draw large audiences, but who may want to watch it for free. Other artists, the nature of their art may draw relatively few audience members, but who are willing to pay something for that content. So I don't think there's a rubber stamp that says, here's what everyone should do, but I think you should look at your own art making and say, what type of artist am I right now? And or what type of artist do I want to be like? And do I think I can have widespread appeal where I can be up in the, 6 figures, if not 7 figures, million plus views, subscribers, those types of things for free, but where I can then show that value to advertisers? Or, you know what, the reality is there are 200 people out there in the world or in the country who love my art. Because if those 200 people are, and, they just all say, this is phenomenal, and, are willing to commit $10, and you put out something every week, then that'll be $40 per month that they each do, which will be 200 times 4, 800. So that's $8,000 a month that you have. All of a sudden, you have about $100,000 coming in a year from your artistry, from just those 200 people. And you don't need thousands of views, you don't need anything, but you need to cultivate that audience of 200 people and bring them value. But no matter what, you can't just say, well, it's just this and so on and so forth. And, someone solve my issue for me. Unfortunately, those days as an artist are over. And that includes management as well. The days where you could just say, I've got a manager, I've got an agent, they're going to do my bookings, right? Those days are pretty much gone. You have to build your own value. You can absolutely surround yourself with people who know more. I don't know about this digital space. Find someone who does and engage them in value. 20% of whatever I get, I'll give to you. Help me with my social media stuff, right? Something along those lines, whatever. Build a team of people if you need that help. But ultimately, as an artist, you have to demonstrate your value either to audiences enough where they will pay for your content, or enough so that you have enough people viewing your content for free where you are able to demonstrate your value to advertisers. And there's one third last kind of suggestion I would say, which is those tend to be the two digital models right now. Either you're going to be based off of advertising, you'll be based off of subscription content. And by the way, there's platforms like Patreon and others that make it very, very, very easy to deliver your content, develop subscribers that help you with this. So you don't need to hire a marketing firm or those types of things. And obviously Facebook, YouTube, and all these are really built to do a lot of this. But the third is to invent some new model that I'm not mentioning, that a whole bunch of people may not be doing, but might be a new way to demonstrate your value as an artist. And the reality is that someone's going to do it. Someone is going to think of some way that will develop a value and hence a revenue stream around their artistry that someone has not done. It will be a bold step for sure. And most people will probably tell them they're crazy, but they're going to do it and they'll be successful, or they won't be successful, they'll fail, but a whole bunch of people will look at them and realize where they went wrong, and then they will make it happen. And then of course, the person who was on the front line is going to be like, oh man. Yeah. But that's how our world evolves. And that would be my best suggestion for the artists out there, along with just understanding that I feel your pain. I am also a performing artist who has had gigs that have been canceled, and a speech artist that have had gigs that are canceled. So I feel your pain on that. And the question is, how are we thinking our way forward? How are we innovating through this rather than just reacting to it and potentially letting it overtake us?
Wow. 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 We are, listen, we're already over time. I could literally sit here for hours and have this conversation with you.
I'm always happy to sit and talk with you, Andre.
I do want to just comment on one thing and then we'll wrap up here. I think one of the things in terms of, you talk about this sustainable model and building your base and 200 people, for example. I think where a lot of people get hung up, and I would encourage people who are listening not to get hung up on, is, the numbers in building your audience, because we have everything is a now, and everything is so fast paced and it's a numbers thing. We look at our numbers on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever have you. And if they're not in the thousands of numbers, we think that we're not being successful. And that's just not true. I mean, even if you look at venues and halls, a lot of them don't even fit 1,000 people. So, you think about what your audience and what your space is and what you're able to create with the audience that you do have, whether it's 25 or 50 or 100. The great thing about technology and the internet right now is everything lives online in perpetuity. So it's going to be there, and people can always tune in. So I appreciate your perspective. We've talked about, surrounding yourself with individuals. We've talked about the funding. We've talked about, and the most important to me is, don't be afraid to fail. You will fail, and that's completely okay. Is how you recover and what you learn from that experience that will help you move into the next phase of what you're trying to accomplish. And the challenge to everyone that's tuning in and listening is, and what Aaron has also said, what I gathered, is to invent something new that is of value, and to your artistry, and find a way to make that a revenue stream. And we all have the fortunate opportunity right now to create and to be creative and to be innovative, and to be an entrepreneur. And so I want to leave everyone with that action item to innovate, to innovate, and to develop something new and to be innovative. And before I sign off, Aaron, I want to give you the last word before I do our official sign off.
Well, just that it's been great to be able to be on here with you and to talk about these really incredibly important issues. And I just encourage everyone out there to keep in mind that this work that we do in the arts really matters, and is more important than ever in our society. We are often faced with times where we wonder potentially the service or value of what we do. The arts are that bridge that connect us as people and that help define ourselves and define each of us to one another. And we need that more than ever, both within our nation as well as around the world. And so I thank everyone who's watching, who has taken on this role, this mantle as an artist, and who will and are kind of the troubadours of our society and of our shared experiences. So thank you so much for letting me be on here with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so thrilled to have this interview and conversation with you. And there's a lot of things that I will take back and implement. I'm excited to see the comments that the viewers have left. And if you have additional questions, please do chime in to the threads, and we'll be sure to address them as well. Thank you, Aaron Dworkin, for joining us. Thank you, everyone else, for tuning in, whether you're doing this live or on replay. And I encourage everyone to tune in weeknights. Keeping the Beat will now be moving to Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 7 p.m. CT. So tune in then to keep watching Keeping the Beat live, and remember to tell your friends about the program. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Keeping the Beat, and thank you, everyone, for joining us. Take care. Good night. Be inspired. Invent and create. Thank you.